Welcome. You are at the T-STEM Academies Blueprint Deep Dive. Thanks so much for spending some time with us. I know at the end of a very long day, it's hard to stay, but I think I've got some good stuff to tell you. I'm Stacey Avery. I'm the Director of Post-Secondary Programs at TEA. I also have a couple staff members with me who work on this program. I don't think they're in the room because they were out doing some presentations, Shanielle Canada and Jennifer Sanders. So we have, here's our agenda for today, and we're going to be covering a lot in a short amount of time. So what I've done is I have set up a poll everywhere. So if you want to take a picture of that slide, you can give me questions throughout the presentation, and we'll answer just as many as we can. And then we'll also turn those into FAQs. So the poll everywhere is anonymous, which is sometimes dangerous, but want to make sure that you have an opportunity to ask questions because some of this information I think is going to be new to you all. And I'll apologize in advance, but my computer is going to fall asleep, so I'm going to keep walking over and moving the trackpad. So everyone got their picture? You ready to move on? Okay, great. So let's talk about the TEA College and Career Readiness Models. So one thing that, how many of you have seen this slide before from TEA? Couple people. When Commissioner Morath came into the agency just over 2 years ago, he wanted to put together a strategic plan for the agency because, believe it or not, we didn't have one. And so this is a graphic of his strategic plan, and I want to highlight the mission, and that is every child prepared for success in college and career and the military. Every child. Every child means every child, not just certain kids, all kids. And you heard Brittany Wagner talk about it this morning. It's all about making a difference for that one child, and everybody makes a difference for one child, then 2 children, then 3, and so on. All the work that we do that you're going to hear about today is covered in Strategic Priority 3, connecting high school to career and college. Now, you don't see military mentioned in that one because military is inherent, because it is a career. So we are still talking about military in all this. We want kids to be prepared for whatever they want to do when they graduate from high school. All of the other strategic priorities are just as important because we can't graduate them ready for college and career if we don't recruit, retain, and support our teachers. If they don't have that foundation in reading and math, they're not going to be successful in high school. So everything is very much interconnected. I feel like I'm getting a lot of echo. Here are our college and career readiness school models, or our CCRSM. I know it rolls off the tongue, but this includes early college, T-STEM, P-TECH, and ICIA, and whoa, I just see that we put T-STEM twice. It's because we're doubly important, okay? But they are all programs that focus on getting kids ready for life beyond high school, whatever that life is. So let's talk about our CCRSM models because they have gone through some changes and our blueprints have gone through some changes over the last year. All of our models have a blueprint. All of those blueprints have been either updated recently or created. A year ago, we rolled out the new early college blueprint, and now a year later, we've rolled out the new T-STEM blueprint. How many of you have seen the new T-STEM blueprint? Yay, excellent. Then this is going to be an easy session. And we just developed a P-TECH ICIA blueprint because that came out of last legislative session, and we had a legislatively appointed advisory council. They were appointed by the governor, the lieutenant governor, and the speaker to guide us in what they wanted in that blueprint. So that's the one we've just finished. But all the blueprints are created to coincide with our designation, and all of our models now have a new entry point. Prior to the 18-19 designation, if you wanted to become a T-STEM, you just applied for designation. We'd review your application. If you said everything that you were going to meet, all the blueprint, you were designated. We didn't really follow up to make sure you were doing what you said you were going to do in your application. And we didn't really have any focused student outcomes. So those are some changes we're going to go through today in the blueprint. So all of the planning year, anyone who wants to enter will apply for a planning year. And all the planning years designations will run in the fall. And it's not really a designation, it's just our way of saying, you want to be in the planning year, we'll give you technical assistance for a year, with the goal being you apply for designation next year. Our renewal designations will now all happen in January. So this year, it was a little strange because everything was going on at different times, and we'll apologize for the confusion right now. But next year, we want to get everything in alignment. And then anyone who's in a planning year or anyone who's designated will receive technical assistance through our provider, which is Educate Texas. So one thing to keep in mind as we talk about today, designation is tied to a blueprint. In the past, we only had two models, early college and T-STEM. Early college focused on the 60 hours, getting students with an associate's degree. T-STEM focused on credentials, heavy CTE, but we had some schools who said we want to do both. So they were a blended T-STEM early college. We've replaced that blended T-STEM early college with the P-TECH model now. Therefore, your campus can only be designated in one model moving forward, either early college, P-TECH ICIA, or T-STEM. The only exception to that would be if you're at a large comprehensive high school and you want to have a smaller learning community of early college with one set of students, a cohort, P-TECH ICIA with another cohort, you could do that. And that's differentiated in the PEIMS indicator, which we'll talk about. So if a school wants to convert, so if you're a T-STEM and you want to become a P-TECH, then you would apply for a P-TECH planning year. We'd spend the year getting all those requirements that P-TECH has that T-STEM doesn't. You'd still be a T-STEM in the planning year, and then when your planning year's over, you'd move to P-TECH. Also, we talked just briefly, and we'll talk more with some graphics here in a minute, about the PEIMS indicator. Students can't be double-coded. They're either T-STEM, early college, P-TECH ICIA, or they're coded to 0, meaning they don't participate in any of those programs. It's not kids who've taken a dual credit course. It's not kids who've only earned a credential, a certificate in industry certification. It's, are they enrolled in your early college? Yes, then you mark them. No, then you mark them 0. So 1 is a yes, 0 is a no. And I'll show you some documents about that in a minute. So let's talk a little bit about the T-STEM blueprint. If you do not have a copy of the blueprint, this is where you can go to get it. I'll make sure that the presentation is made available to Educate Texas so you can download it. The blueprint has 6 benchmarks, and that's just like the old blueprint, nothing different. We've made some changes, and I'm going to walk you through those changes. There's also 3 levels of designation: provisional, designated, or distinguished. Now know that designation is completely separate from accountability, though some of the indicators in Domain 1 are in the T-STEM blueprint, but they're completely separate processes, so I want you to keep that in mind. So here's kind of a big picture overview of the T-STEM blueprint. You have, let me go back one, you have design elements. That's what's in your blueprint. Those are non-negotiable, you must do those. There's no, I'm halfway doing it. It's a yes or a no. You have to do those to keep your designation. Then there's the outcomes-based measures, OBMs. And those are specific student outcomes that we're looking for. We want to make sure that we are showcasing the great work you are doing, and what speaks to legislators and funders is hard student data. So by looking at the OBMs and pulling that data out of PEIMS, we can show the great work you're doing. Within the blueprint, if you remember, we used to have role model, developing, I see heads shaking, yes, you remember those. Those were really, we didn't really use those for anything except for you to have a goal what to shoot for, to move from developing all the way to role model. Now we actually have some categories that we'll designate you in. One is provisional. And if you are operating 0 through 4 years, you are only provisional. Your outcomes-based measures will be measured against the provisional OBMs. If you've been designated for 5 or more years, we'll measure you against the designated. We'll also measure those against 5 or more years to see who are our top performers, and they will get a distinguished designation. It's okay if your goal is distinguished, but if you are designated, that still means your bar is very high and you are doing a lot more than just a traditional high school, which you know you are. So the bar is already very high for provisional and designated. We just set it a little higher for distinguished. Because when we solicited stakeholder feedback, what we heard was, we want a way to showcase that we're the best of the best of the best. So we created that designation. We also have a needs improvement. So as we start focusing on the outcomes-based measures, the OBMs, schools that aren't meeting the OBMs may be given a needs improvement. I'm not going to say designation, but you'll be given a needs improvement term, and we'll ask you to work with the technical assistance provider to improve those areas in the OBMs. That's not going to happen this year. It's not going to happen next year. It's not going to happen until we fully phase in the OBMs, and I'm going to talk about that. And you'll see a little chart on that. So the T-STEM blueprint has 2 things: design elements, non-negotiable, the outcomes-based measures, that's your student performance. So the design elements. Hopefully you all recognize these categories. School design, we renamed and moved them a little bit, but they're very similar. So let's just dig in deep to one of these. And remember, if you have questions, go ahead and send them to me. Keeping my computer awake for you. So, let me back up a minute. Before we go into the blueprint design element, Scott, would you pull up the PDF number 1? So I get a lot of questions from people that say, Stacy, we don't understand the difference between T-STEM, early college, and P-TECH ICIA. So we put together this chart, and we're gonna post it on our website. I'm also gonna give it to Educate Texas so you can download it. But basically, we've taken all the models across the top, and we've taken some blueprint requirements, and we've said, yes, they're required, no, they're not required, and any information in here. So for example, open enrollment, meaning no barriers to letting kids in, is a requirement for all of them. Can't use test scores, you can't use an interview, you can't say, you had a discipline referral, so we are not taking you. Open enrollment means open enrollment. That it's at no cost is somewhere on here, that's for everyone. However, early colleges are not required to have an MOU with business and industry. Could you have an MOU with business and industry? Yes, you could. You're not required, though. Also, under the opportunities for college credit is different. Early college has to focus on the associate's degree in the 60 hours, where T-STEM does not. So there are some differences between. The other piece to keep in mind is the legislation for each program gives students a different amount of time to finish their high school, to meet their high school graduation requirements. Early college law says they can have 5 years. However, almost everyone does it in 4. P-TECH says they can have up to 6 years. And that's because students are having work-based learning at every grade level, which may put them behind in their earning of their high school graduation credit. So they may have to take additional courses in grade 13 and 14 to make that up. Can you go back to the PowerPoint, Scott? So we'll have that document. It'll be available to you. If you're not able to download it, you'll have the email here at the end of the session, so you can email us and we'll make sure you get it. So the 6 benchmarks for T-STEM. Let's go through each of them right now. So benchmark 1, school design. Focuses on the design of the academy. How are you going to set yourself up? Are you a school within a school? Are you a standalone? Are you using some other model? What are your leadership team requirements? Your leadership team is key to the success of your STEM Academy. What are your minimum staff requirements? Who do we have to hire? Do we need someone named a principal? Or can we just have a leader? And what is your professional development? How are you gonna support, retain, and recruit those teachers? Some of the changes from the old blueprint, we provided a lot more flexibility. We designed the what, not the how. So we give you some suggestions for who should be on your leadership team, but that is not required. You're required to have a school leader. But we understand, particularly for our small and rural schools, that having two principals in one building, if you're operating a school within a school model, is problematic for a variety of reasons. You have to have somebody that's designated as a leader, but you can call them whatever you want. We also had a lot of feedback from the T-STEM core classes. What if we have 20 T-STEM students needing Algebra 1, yet the teacher could take 30 in her room? Can we put 10 non-T-STEM students in there? Yes. We want you to focus on keeping those T-STEM students together as a cohort as much as possible, because you heard from the panelists up here, one thing they all said was what was most important? Culture, setting that culture. And for those that are operating a school within a school, I'm sure you see the difference between your kids and the traditional high school kids, just in the expectations. The panel talked earlier about the maturity that the kids are required to have, those kind of things. And also for each of the blueprints now, we have required products that we want you to put up on your website. We want you to be transparent, and we want to be transparent with you. We want students to know what they're doing and parents to know what the expectations of the students are when they come into a T-STEM Academy. So let's take a look. This should be familiar. I am not going to, I just missed it by a second. Let me log back in. There we go. Remember, ask me questions. I'm not going to read all of this to you, but it talks about where an academy should be. We get a lot of questions saying, could we have a central site that doesn't have their own CDC number that pulls from all 4 of our high schools in the district? Sure, you can. That means you have to give us the CDC number for all 4 of those high schools, and you have to ensure that all 4 of those attendance clerks and PEIMS coordinators understand how to code those kids. But that is definitely a model that you could use. Talks about the leadership team. Oops. We also talk about who it shall be and who it may be. So it shall include this, but it may include these people. Shall means you have to do it. May means it's up to you. The other piece, again, the T-STEM Academy has to be offered at no cost. You can't charge the kids for dual credit. You can't charge them for textbooks. You can't charge them for transportation. Here are the products and the activities that are expected out of Benchmark 1. Now, I have a chart a little bit later that shows you all the expectations out of each benchmark. Target population. This is really no different than anything you've been asked to do. I see some yes shaking heads. Many of you may not know, but T-STEM in early college started back in like 2005, 2006 under Governor Perry. T-STEM was actually an executive order from him. And they were created as a dropout prevention strategy. They wanted to find a way to keep kids in school, stem our dropout problem in Texas, and give them skills so they can contribute to the economic future of the state. So that's what we're doing. Your target population I mentioned before, you cannot put up barriers for kids to get into the T-STEM Academy. And I get a lot of administrators and parents that call me and say, but we pick who we want on the football team, we pick who we want in academic competitions. Yeah, you do. However, all means all. All students have an opportunity to be in the T-STEM Academy. You're not taking it based on grades, on did they take Algebra 1 in 8th grade. I've had a lot of conversations today with folks saying, we have an issue because our kids don't take Algebra 1 till 9th grade. My question back is, have you worked with your middle schools to figure out what to do? And they said, yes, they only allow the kids in Algebra 1 whose parents want them there. You're putting up a barrier. Because maybe some other kids would be really good in Algebra 1 in 8th grade, but they just don't understand what that means. Their parents don't understand. Also get a lot of questions on the lottery. Do we have to do a lottery? So here's my explanation of the lottery. Let's say you have 100 slots in your school and you have 200 kids apply. How do you determine? You cannot rank them because that's putting up a barrier. You can't go through and say, here's our top 20. What you can do is draw them out of a lottery. If you have 100 slots and you get 90 kids, take them all. You don't have to do a lottery. That would be silly to draw 90 names when you're going to take them all anyway. We reordered some of the requirements in here. We added some access OBMs, and we included the activities and products. How many of you completed designation applications this year? Raise your hand. How many of you liked the new easy designation application? Raise your hand. That's our goal. If you have comments on how to change it for next year, email them to us. We always want to improve and get better. We're not trying to make things be burdensome. We're just trying to collect the information we need to make decisions. So let's look at benchmark 2. Clearly says you can't use GPAs. Clearly says you can't put up barriers. And the documents that we're requesting that you put on your website are things like your written recruitment plan, a timeline of your outreach, et cetera, and so forth. I get asked the question, so we put it up once and we can't change it. No, it's your living, breathing document. You keep updating it and changing it over and over as much as you need to. But in the fall, the coaches are going to have a checklist that they're going to bring back to me. And I'm going to say, tell me if the STEM Academy has everything on their website. And they're not, I hesitate to say this, while I want everything to be quality, they're not looking for quality. That's not their job. Their job is to tell me yes or no, it's there. But I want everything to be quality. We also want you to develop and learn from each other, because any struggles any one of you have had, I guarantee somebody else has had it. So if you haven't collected names from other schools around the state, collect those names. Get involved in the Educate Texas Community of Practice on the website. How many of you are involved in the Community of Practice? Oh gosh, like 3 hands. Ask your coach what that is. Get involved in the Community of Practice. It is an amazing support system for you. My best way to describe it, which isn't a good way, is like a threaded listserv. You post, we're struggling with TSI preparation, and you're going to get ideas from schools across the state on what they do. Okay? So use that. So benchmark 3 is all about those strategic alliances, all about those partnerships. It's very similar to the previous partnership agreement section of the old blueprint, but it's about your MOU with IHEs, MOU with business partners, and it details the statutory requirements. Now, I get these 2 questions a lot. If we have 17 business partners, do we have to have an MOU with all of them? So my response to you would be, our requirement is that you have 1 business partner and you have 1 fully executed agreement with a business partner. If you have other business partners, fabulous. It's quality, not quantity. And I would highly recommend, but again, you need to talk to your lawyer. I'm not a legal person. I would highly recommend, if you have agreements with businesses, you get them in writing. Here's our responsibility. Here's your responsibility. Here's the liability. We're bringing kids over to operate big machinery. What's the liability? You need to cover yourself. So have agreements. Same with your IHE. You're required to have 1 IHE partner for your dual credit. Can you have more? Sure. We have a lot of schools that have more. Again, check with your legal. But I highly recommend any partner that you have a very strong agreement outlining all the elements, because it will help mitigate problems a little bit later on. So we don't want your MOUs at TEA, we want them posted on the website. Here's benchmark 3, strategic alliances. You can see T-STEM got the royal purple and gold color. Every blueprint's slightly different colored. We've got the purple and yellow. And there's your activities. So benchmark 4, really the meat and potatoes of your T-STEM Academy. We want you to focus on the course of the program of study and the crosswalk. How many of you went in to hear Heather Justice's CTE presentation today? Anyone? A couple people. So you know there's going to be some changes to TEA's program of study. We're going to release them in November, but we're doing a major realignment with what the workforce needs are in the state. So look for those in the fall, the early fall, for planning for the next year. So you may have to do some realignments. Because as you heard Rio or someone say this morning, we don't want to prepare kids for a job that isn't there, that they can't go work in, or that is a job 900 miles away and they may not want to leave their community. So the work that we do in our schools has to align with what the workforce is. Yesterday at the pre-conference I asked this, how many of you work with your workforce development boards in your area? How many of you know what your workforce development boards are? That's what I thought. Every area of Texas has workforce development boards. They're on the Texas Workforce Commission's website. These people should be your best friends. They know what businesses are coming to your area. They know what the labor demands are in your area. They know the job forecast in your area. They have resources like you would not believe. They partner with your employers. They can connect you up. So if you haven't worked with them, please do. If you don't know how to find your local workforce board, let me know and I'll help you. But you can Google Texas workforce boards and you'll see the map of where they all are. Their system does not align with our Education Service Center system, so if you're in Region 10, doesn't mean you're in Workforce Board 10. We didn't coordinate when we numbered them. Workforce Board has their own numbers. So we added the attainment OBMs, which we'll look at in a minute. We included additional details about the crosswalk. We want you to look at the pathways to certification. And also, most of our schools do a really good job about the articulation from high school to college to 2-year, but what about 2-year to 4-year? So think about that. The students need to know what their on-ramps and off-ramps are. If I long-term want to be an engineer, but I can't go all the way right now, where can I get off and go work? Well, I could get this certification, and then I'm prepped to come back on and get this degree, and I'm prepped to go back off. So we want to prepare our students for that. So here's just a quick look at benchmark 4. If you're wondering what I'm looking at, my timer's up here. So let's talk about benchmark 5. This is actually a brand new one in our blueprint, and that's work-based learning. We really want to ensure that all of our students have opportunities for work-based learning at every grade level. And that looks a little bit different at 9th grade than it does at 10th, 11th, and 12th. So we want you to think about what that sequencing of courses would look like. Oh, great, I got a lot of questions. So we are going to have a work-based learning coordinator starting at TEA on July 16th, and his first job is to develop a statewide framework and resources. So we'll have some of those resources for you in 6 months, but think about what that work-based learning looks like. Work-based learning is now a new benchmark. It details the specific student connections between what they're learning in academics and what real practice is. So here's some of the blueprint on work-based learning. And then our 6th benchmark is student support. Remember I talked earlier about those local workforce development boards? It's in the blueprint here. I think I have an error on my slide 6. Let's look at this. It's about social emotional support, what kind of activities you're gonna have, what's your parent outreach, your advisory, all those things you do already. This just details them. And here are the things that you have to put up on your website. And I get the question a lot, when do we have to have these up on our website? By the first day of school. I know you're all anxiously awaiting your designations. We are this close to getting them. Because we had the shift in the models and added P-TECH, we had to outreach to a lot of schools individually because they applied for early college, T-STEM, and P-TECH. We needed to see which one they wanted. We had to pull all this data, and so we're a little slow this year, but we'll have all of our processes down pat for next year, so thank you for your patience. But for T-STEM designees, you'll have to have this by the first day of school. And you gave us your URL when you applied for designation. So I told you that I have a required products list. This is required products by benchmark. So I'll give you just a minute to take a look at them. Okay, so I want to talk through the OBMs, then I'm going to go to some, well actually let me go to some questions before we go to the OBMs. Some of the questions, I'm concerned about work-based learning for middle school, help. So again, work-based learning for middle school could be something simple as a speaker. It could be something as simple as having an external person come in and demonstrate something and having students interact with something that they're doing. We know that businesses have specific requirements about the age of students. So for work-based learning, for middle school, students may not be able to go out in a business, but it may mean that you can take them as a group on a tour of a business where they talk to them about the work they do. But you really have to be careful of liabilities. I think when Shane, our work-based learning person, comes, that is an area he is going to address. He's really an expert in that. But think through what that might look like. Talk with your colleagues on what that might look like. Somebody's asking, did you say T-STEM campuses cannot charge for dual credit classes? Yes. If you are designated T-STEM, you cannot pass the cost on to the students. The school or the community college has to cover that. Oh, this is a great question. Do we have to notify TEA every time we change one of these documents? Oh no, please don't. I can't keep up with my email now. Please don't. We expect that they're living, breathing documents, okay? We want to make sure that you have them, and all of yours are going to be different. What I don't want, and this happens in designation all the time, we will say, give us a copy of your MOU, and somebody will upload something off their desktop, a letter, a school newsletter, and say, oops. As much as it happens, I'm not really sure it's an oops. I'm thinking you don't know where your MOU is and you uploaded something just so you could go on through designation. So we want you to make sure you have these documents, because having these documents is just not a checklist for us. It's all about having the pieces in place so you can be successful. One of the questions I just got said, do you have a sample MOU? Great question, we don't, because historically TEA has said this is a legal document between your partner and your school, and we're not a party to it. However, I want to show you examples, so we're going to be creating some examples and putting them out there. We're going to be asking some of you, will you share your MOU? Will you share your business agreement? Because again, it's all about sharing and learning. So we'll be asking that. So no, we don't have any, but yes, we want to. Give me a minute to look at some of these questions. This is a great question. Do 504 students count as students with disabilities? No. In PEIMS, you We're going back in my recesses a little bit. Last time I looked at the data, there is one main category for special ed students. That's the category we're using. And those are only for distinguished T-STEMs that we're using special ed. We have to decide whether to stay in early college or go ICIA. Can an Associate of Arts be part of or a pathway within an ICIA, or can it only be an industry-related field? So this is a big conversation we've been having with PTECs and ICIAs and the business community. Really look at what your workforce needs are, because Toyota tells me we want to train our people. We don't care if they have an associate's degree. We want them to learn from us. We want an industry certification. Yet another business says, we want them to have that associate's degree. So you need to look at what your business is and make that determination. Both may be acceptable, okay? If a business says we want an associate's degree and you're not going that path, and that's your pathway and that's your program of study, and you're only getting them an industry certificate, then that could be an issue, because your businesses are telling you they want the associates. So it depends on what your plan is. Okay, I'm going to come back to some more questions, but I want to make sure we get through everything. So let's look at the outcomes-based measures. We have outcomes-based measures in 3 areas: access, achievement, and attainment, and you can see what they're related to up here. So these OBMs are going to be phased in. I don't have a phase-in chart yet for T-STEM because we just finalized the T-STEM blueprint about a month ago. We will use PEIMS data you report for the OBMs. You will not report any data outside of PEIMS. Correct PEIMS coding by schools is of utmost importance. Scott, would you switch over to this document? So the document I'm going to show you is for early college, but we're developing one for T-STEM. So with early college, you can see, and I know it's a little hard to read, but for this year, we looked at their access measures and we only looked at 9th graders. For next year, we're going to look at 9th graders for at-risk, but 9th and 10th, until we build up in 21-22 to look at 9th through 12th. But at-risk only looks at 9th. Because as we talked to you, you told us when we do our job well, those kids that were at-risk in 9th grade aren't at risk by 11th grade. So we wanted to make sure we recognize that, so that's in there. Scott, I don't know if you can scroll down to page 2, but if you could, there we go. So again, this is early college. We're going to develop one for T-STEM, but this is attainment, and you can see for the first year, nothing. For the second year, nothing. For the third year, we're going to use 1. We don't start using these until 21-22 because we're building your cohorts. You can switch back to the PowerPoint, please. So again, that was the early college chart. You will see one for T-STEM coming out in the very near future. Make sure that your leader keeps their email updated with us so you can get that information. Here's the PEIMS indicator. We've had this PEIMS indicator in place since 14, 15 school year, several years, and yet it's not done correctly. So talk with your PEIMS people. Make sure they are coding your students correctly. I get calls from PEIMS coordinators and say, hey, Stacy, can you tell us who our T-STEM students are? I can't. I don't know who your students are. I would never want that information. That's FERPA protected. I don't want that. And I said, no, but if you go talk to the principal, who I have down as Mr. or Mrs. So-and-so, they can tell you. So there's a lack of communication. The other question I get is, Stacy, can you tell us where we can run a report out of our student information system to figure out if our students are meeting the target or the access OBMs? I can't do that either because I don't know Chancery and I don't know all the student information systems. But everything we're pulling, with the exception of TSIA data, you report to TEA and PEIMS, so you have it in your system already. So leaders, I would encourage you as we go into these OBMs to think about how can you look at your data and how can you make plans? Because while some of this data we won't use till 21, 22, you got to plan now so that you have all the pieces in place by 21, 22. So here's our outcomes-based measures for access. You can see, I feel like I'm ignoring this side of the room, sorry. You can see that target population for incoming ninth graders, we want you to mirror the district's population. And it's not a 100% mirror. So what do I mean by that? If your district ninth graders are 60% at risk, we would expect your T-STEM ninth graders to be 40% or greater at risk. Because again, T-STEM, early college, P-TECH, ICIA is not a magnet program. You're not accepting only the best of the best. The best of the best can come in, but they have the same opportunity as everyone else. And then you can see we're also looking for African American students, Hispanic students, economically disadvantaged, and then females, and then, I can't read that, students with disabilities and ELLs. And provisional follows this column, designated the middle column, and distinguished the third column. If you don't meet distinguished, then we look at do you meet designated. So here's our outcome-based measures for attainment. Grade-to-grade retention, which we really need to work on that. Our goal is saying, are you retaining those kids once they come into you? Because we've heard about some schools that if they don't meet what they need to meet, they wash them out and send them somewhere else. That's not the goal of early college or T-STEM. And the other people are coming in, so we're gonna move. And our achievement outcomes-based measures. We'll do a webinar just for T-STEMs on these. Here's our phase-in of the grade levels. So you can see we're not going to start measuring everything till you have a graduation cohort, and then that data lags, so it'll be another year after that. Some of these take 6 years to phase in, so it's not happening today or tomorrow. So let's talk a little bit about designation. I mentioned this earlier. Anyone that wants to enter wants to become a T-STEM, they'll have to go through a planning year. Planning year applications will happen in the fall, and renewals will happen in January of 2019. So here is our email address, so write it down. I have 1 minute and 45 seconds, so let me log in and see if there's any questions I can answer in that amount of time. But keep your questions coming. Good question, is there any funding tied to T-STEM designation? No. T-STEM designation is voluntary. If we get money appropriated by the legislature, we will run grants. That's how we started our T-STEM academies. We just don't have any funding right now, and going into next legislative session, we think it'll be a tight budget again. I thought the access OBMs were for the incoming 18, 19, 9th graders, but you mentioned 17, 18. Yes, it is for the 18, 19. If I said 17, 18, that was an error. Early college was 17, 18. They're a year ahead of you in terms of the OBMs. If we're a charter, do we have to have an MOU? Let's talk about that offline, because I don't really know. If you're a charter with the university, I don't know really what your relationship is, so we need to talk about that. And with that said, we are at time. So I want to thank you very much. Thanks for coming. Thank you for the hard work you do day to day. I was a teacher. I know what you do day to day, and I really appreciate you. Thank you.